My husband is 50 years old and he cheated on me for a woman who is only 25 years old. He stole my fortune, my company, and my peace. All for her sweet lies and fake promises. He thought he'd found love again, but what he really found was the beginning of his own downfall. Before I begin, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it there right now? Hi, my name is Eleanor Morgan, and I'm 55 years old. People in Miami now call me the Diamond Widow, but once, I was simply a woman who believed that love could never betray me. I grew up in a house where wealth and reputation defined everything. My father built one of the most successful diamond companies in the United States, Morgan Jewels. After his death, I inherited the empire he had spent his entire life building. I was young, ambitious, and determined to make my mark in the luxury world. But beneath that success, there was always an emptiness that money could never fill, the loneliness that comes from sleeping beside power but not passion. I met Daniel at a charity gala I hosted when I was 28. He was 25. Working as an event coordinator that night. I still remember how he approached me, nervous, polite, yet confident enough to look me straight in the eyes when most people only saw my last name. "You look like you could use a break from pretending you're enjoying yourself," he said with a charming half-smile. It made me laugh, something I hadn't done genuinely in months. He wasn't like the men I usually met. No expensive watch, no smooth rehearsed lines, no fake admiration for my wealth. Just a simple man with soft brown eyes and words that felt real. That night, he told me about his modest background, how he grew up helping his mother run a small diner in a poor neighborhood, how he dreamed of starting his own business someday. There was sincerity in his tone, a kind of honesty I thought no longer existed. When he looked at me, I didn't feel like the head of a diamond empire. I felt like a woman, seen, understood, alive. It was intoxicating. Over the next few weeks, we began to meet outside the glittering world of Miami's elite. He would take me for long walks by the ocean, buy me street coffee instead of champagne, and talk about life as if love mattered more than luxury. I told myself that he was different, that maybe for once, someone loved me, not my money. Against my family's warnings, I started to believe in him. My mother said, "Eleanor, love from a man with empty pockets will always come at a cost." I laughed it off then. I thought she was just being cruel, blinded by old-fashioned pride. When Daniel proposed to me, he didn't kneel on a red carpet or offer a diamond ring. He simply took my hands in his, right on that same pier where we used to meet, and said, "I can't promise you the world, Ellie. But I can promise you I'll never let you face it alone." Those words melted every wall I had ever built around my heart. Within a few months, we were married, a quiet ceremony overlooking the sea. No cameras, no journalists, no guest lists filled with business tycoons. Just us. At that moment, I was convinced I had found peace. For the first time, I felt free from the suffocating expectations of my world. I thought love had finally chosen me. I couldn't have known then that the man standing beside me, whispering forever, would one day steal everything I had, not just my fortune, but the very meaning of forever itself. The first few years of our marriage were everything I had dreamed of. Daniel and I lived in my ocean view mansion on Palm Island, surrounded by everything a woman could possibly desire. Success, comfort, and the illusion of perfect love. He would wake up early to make coffee for both of us, saying, "You handle diamonds, I'll handle mornings." It felt so genuine then. Every small gesture of care pulled me deeper into the belief that I had finally found someone who loved me for who I was, not what I owned. When Daniel joined Morgan Jewels, I was the one who insisted. He never asked, or at least, he made it seem that way. "You don't have to," he said once. "I'm fine being your husband, not your business partner." His humility charmed me. I told him I wanted us to share everything, even my work. He smiled softly and replied, "Then let me earn your trust the way I earned your love." It sounded so pure that I couldn't help but believe him. He started by helping with charity events and publicity campaigns. Soon, the staff adored him. He was kind, funny, approachable, and quick to take credit for nothing. At least that's what I thought. I began to rely on him more, trusting his suggestions, his judgment, even his instincts. My friends sometimes teased me, saying, "You're turning your company into a family affair." I took it as a compliment. Our evenings were simple. He would cook dinner, we'd share wine, and he'd listen to me talk about my projects as if my every word mattered. When he said, "You work too hard, Ellie. You deserve to rest," it didn't sound like control, it sounded like love. Slowly, I began letting go of responsibilities, signing small documents without reading every line, and depending on him to manage the day-to-day details. My mother noticed the changes first. "He's charming, but charm can be dangerous," she warned. "Never hand your crown to someone who didn't earn it." I brushed her off, smiling like a foolish girl in love. "He's not after my money, Mom," I told her. "He's different." But love, I learned later, can be the most convincing disguise greed ever wears. By our 10th anniversary, Daniel had become the face of Morgan Jewels in public appearances. People began calling us the Morgans, as if we were a brand, not a marriage. He looked handsome in suits, spoke eloquently in interviews, and held my hand with practiced warmth. Sometimes, when cameras flashed, I'd notice how perfectly he smiled, not at me, but at the world watching us. He never raised his voice, never argued, never said anything cruel. His silence was his sharpest weapon. Whenever I questioned something, he would just look at me gently and say, "You don't trust me?" Those 4 words would break my defenses every time. One night, after a company event, he poured me a glass of wine and said, "Ellie, let's make things official. You've carried the weight of this empire long enough. Let me handle the business paperwork and meetings for a while. You focus on design, on what you truly love." It sounded reasonable, even loving. I didn't see it as a warning. I saw it as relief. That night, I signed the first document that would eventually cost me everything. I didn't know it yet, but with each signature, I was handing him the keys to my empire, my legacy, and my peace of mind. Still, in that moment, I looked at him across the table, his smile glowing in the candlelight, and thought, this is what trust looks like. I was wrong. It was what surrender looks like. The transformation began so quietly that I barely noticed it. Daniel's charm, once so effortless, became his most powerful weapon. He started making decisions without consulting me. Little things at first. Changing suppliers, hiring new marketing executives, approving design changes. When I questioned it, he'd say, "You've built this empire, Ellie. I'm just keeping it running while you rest." There was something comforting in his tone, and I wanted to believe him. After all, he was my husband, my partner, my confidant, the man I trusted more than anyone else. Within a year, my name started fading from the company's daily operations. My executives would look to Daniel for final approval. My board members, most of whom he charmed over dinners and golf outings, began referring to him as Mr. Morgan, the business brain behind Morgan Jewels. I laughed it off at first. I thought they were exaggerating. I didn't realize I had already started losing my crown while still sitting on the throne. Our marriage seemed calm, even perfect. But the calm was built on quiet control. Daniel began managing my schedule. "You work too much," he'd say, turning off my alarm clock. "You need rest, Ellie." He encouraged me to spend weekends away from the office, to take long spa retreats, to enjoy life. It sounded sweet, but every time I stepped back, he stepped further in. Then came the paperwork. "It's just a routine merger agreement," he said once, sliding a folder across the dining table. "Legal wants both our signatures since we're joint shareholders." I didn't think twice. I signed it while sipping my wine. Later, there was another document, just a small restructuring form, and then another. Some nights he'd come to me in bed, wrap his arms around me, and whisper, "Ellie, you trust me, right?" And I would nod, too in love to notice how my pen was bleeding me dry. The house staff changed too. My old assistants, who'd been with me for years, began leaving one by one. Daniel replaced them with people who answered only to him. My home, once a sanctuary, started to feel like a hotel I no longer owned. Yet I convinced myself everything was fine. That's what love does. It blinds you, not with passion but with denial. My closest friend, Laura, came to visit one afternoon. She looked at me with concern. "You're fading, Ellie. You used to be fire, now you're glass." I laughed it off, pretending her words didn't sting. But that night, When I saw Daniel's name printed above mine on a business card, Daniel Morgan, CEO, Morgan Jewels, something inside me flickered uneasily. When I asked him about it, he smiled easily, sliding his arm around my shoulders. "You're still the heart of the company. I'm just helping it breathe." He kissed my forehead and poured me another glass of wine. "You trust me, don't you?" The words were like a lullaby I couldn't resist. I nodded again. A few months later, I noticed subtle shifts. The house accountant began sending financial reports to Daniel directly. My signature was no longer required on certain transfers. When I mentioned it, Daniel brushed it off. "It's easier for me to handle the boring stuff," he said. "You've done enough." He started spending more time away from home, long business trips, late-night meetings that never seemed to end. But whenever he returned, he brought me small gifts, diamond earrings, perfume, handwritten notes that said, "You're my everything." The irony was cruel. He was buying me peace with pieces of my own money. Then came the gala that changed everything. It was the 30th anniversary of Morgan Jewels, a night meant to celebrate my father's legacy. As I arrived, the room was filled with flashes and applause. Daniel stood beside me on stage, hand on my back, smiling for the cameras. But when the host introduced us, he said, "Please welcome the man who transformed Morgan Jewels into the empire it is today, Mr. Daniel Morgan." The applause echoed through the hall. I smiled for the photographers, but inside, something broke. I realized I was standing beside a man who had quietly replaced me, not just in business, but in my own story. I had become a supporting character in the empire I created. That night, as I removed my jewelry and wiped away my makeup, I looked in the mirror and whispered to myself, "What have I done?" But deep down, I already knew the answer. I had handed my entire world to a man who only loved me for the doors my name could open. The storm didn't arrive suddenly. It crept in like a shadow, soft and silent, until it consumed everything I thought was secure. It started with the whispers. My employees, people who once stood when I entered the room, now lowered their voices when I passed. Meetings were held without my knowledge, documents approved without my consent. Daniel would assure me, "It's all just company noise, Ellie. Don't let the stress get to you." But I could feel the distance growing. The home we shared was now a museum of quiet meals and forced smiles. One afternoon, I stopped by the office unannounced, something I hadn't done in months. The reception desk had a new plaque, Daniel Morgan, Chief Executive Officer. My name was no longer beside his. I stood there, frozen, trying to convince myself that there must be a mistake. When I walked into my own office, the portraits on the wall had been changed. The one of my father shaking hands with a famous client, gone. In its place, a photo of Daniel, smiling proudly in front of a banner that read Morgan Jewels, the new era. I asked him about it that evening, my voice trembling but calm. "You removed my father's portrait." He looked up from his laptop and shrugged. "It was time for an update. The company needs a fresher image. And that image doesn't include me." He gave a small, dismissive laugh. "Ellie, don't be dramatic. You're still part of it. You just don't need to handle the boring details anymore." I wanted to fight, but the truth was, I no longer knew what belonged to me. The house, the cars, even the accounts. All the things I had once owned were now entangled in paperwork I had willingly signed. Then came the final blow. I received a call from my lawyer, who had been handling my personal estate for years. His voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, "I think you should know that your husband has filed for separation. Legally speaking, your assets are under his control now." The world tilted. I felt dizzy, my breath short. "That's not possible," I whispered. "He wouldn't do that to me." But he had. When I confronted Daniel, he didn't even pretend to be remorseful. He stood in the middle of our marble-floored living room, his tie loosened, his expression cold. "Ellie, I've done what's best for both of us," he said. "You'll be comfortable. You'll have enough. But the company needs someone younger, more driven. Someone who can take it to the next level." I stared at him, searching for the man I had once loved, the man who used to bring me coffee in bed, who promised to protect me from the world. But all I saw was a stranger wearing his face. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings and media headlines. The story spread quickly. Daniel Morgan takes control of Morgan Jewels. I stopped answering calls. Friends disappeared. Reporters camped outside my gate, shouting questions about the betrayal that shocked Miami's elite. One night, I saw him on television, standing beside a young woman, her hand resting possessively on his arm. She was stunning, long blonde hair, green eyes, maybe 25 at most. The caption below read, "Daniel Morgan attends charity gala with rising model Serena Blake." My chest tightened. Serena. I'd met her once before, briefly. She had modeled for one of our campaigns 2 years earlier. I remembered the way Daniel had complimented her professionalism, the way his eyes had lingered a little too long when she smiled. Back then, I had laughed about it. How foolish of me. The next morning, Daniel came home smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't mine. I didn't confront him immediately. I waited, watching him, studying every lie that slipped from his lips. And when I finally asked, "Who is she?" he didn't even try to deny it. He exhaled and said, "Serena makes me feel alive again. You wouldn't understand. You've changed, Ellie. We've both changed." I felt my heart fracture with every word. "You're 50 years old, Daniel," I said quietly. "She's half your age." He smiled, actually smiled. Then maybe I've finally found my youth again. That was the last night we spent under the same roof. Within weeks, he filed for divorce. Everything, our mansion, the cars, the company, went to him. I walked out with nothing but a suitcase and the few memories I couldn't bear to leave behind. For a while, I disappeared. I rented a small apartment overlooking the same sea that once reflected our vows of forever. I thought about my father, about how proud he had been of me, and how easily I had let it all slip away. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too numb for tears. Months later, I saw a magazine cover in a grocery store. Daniel Morgan marries model Serena Blake in lavish Miami ceremony. The photo showed them standing in front of my old house. She was wearing one of my company's diamond necklaces, the one Daniel once said reminded him of me. I stared at the cover for a long time before putting it back on the shelf. The cashier asked if I wanted to buy it. I smiled faintly and said, "No, I already paid for that story once." Miami loved them, Daniel and Serena. The city that once adored me as the Queen of Diamonds, now praised them as the power couple of luxury. Every magazine cover, every social media headline showed their smiling faces standing in the same ballroom where Daniel and I once celebrated our anniversaries. I watched their wedding coverage on television. Not because I wanted to, but because it was impossible to avoid. My name flashed briefly at the bottom of the screen. Eleanor Morgan, ex-wife of Daniel Morgan, former owner of Morgan Jewels. Former. That word cut deeper than any knife. Serena looked radiant, flawless, wearing a custom diamond necklace that I recognized instantly. I had designed it years ago and named it Eternal Light. I had created it to symbolize a love that never fades. Now it rested on the neck of the woman who had taken everything from me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Daniel's speeches grew grander, his ego louder. At press conferences, he would talk about innovation, new beginnings, and a fresh vision. He mentioned Serena often, calling her the inspiration behind Morgan Jewels' modern transformation. Every word tasted like poison when I heard it, but I stayed silent. I was learning that silence, too, could be a form of strength. For months, I kept to myself. My apartment was small, simple, nothing like the mansion I had built with my own hands. Yet, for the first time in years, I could breathe. There were no assistants, no photographers, no hollow compliments, just the sound of the ocean through the window and the smell of fresh coffee each morning. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, teaching young girls how to create and design jewelry. Watching them mold silver into art reminded me of the woman I used to be, creative, strong, alive. Slowly, the pain began to dull, though it never disappeared completely. Still, I couldn't avoid hearing about them. Miami's elite is small. Gossip travels faster than truth. I heard about Daniel's new yacht, Serena's modeling deals, and the lavish parties thrown at what used to be my home. They had built their empire on the ruins of mine, and yet, something in the way the media described them felt unstable. Serena's smile, once dazzling, started looking forced in photos. Daniel's speeches sounded hollow, his energy desperate. Then, one night, I received an invitation. It was for Morgan Jewel's annual diamond exhibition, an event I had started 25 years ago. The envelope was embossed with the company logo, but the sender's name made me laugh out loud, Serena Morgan. She had taken not just my company, but even my name. Curiosity overcame bitterness. I attended, dressed in a simple black gown and no diamonds. I didn't need them anymore. When I arrived, the guards didn't recognize me. I was just another face in the crowd. Inside, the event glowed with gold chandeliers and champagne towers. Serena stood at the center of it all, radiant, adored, pretending she belonged in that world. Daniel was at her side, but he looked different, tired, restless, older. When our eyes met across the room, a flicker of recognition passed between us. For the first time, he didn't look like the conqueror. He looked like a man trapped in his own golden cage. Serena leaned into him, whispering something that made him frown. She noticed me then, her gaze scanning me from head to toe, a smirk curling on her lips, as if to say, I won. But beneath that smirk, I saw fear. A kind of greed that eats itself alive. I left early, before they could approach me. As I walked to my car, I caught a glimpse of Serena arguing with Daniel near the entrance, her voice sharp, her expression venomous. The photographers didn't notice it, but I did. It was the first crack in their picture-perfect life. Weeks passed, and the news began to shift. Whispers of tension, financial mismanagement, and cancelled contracts started circulating. Morgan Jewels faced lawsuits over fake diamonds and unpaid debts. Daniel denied everything, but it was clear Serena had her own plans. I didn't feel joy. Just inevitability. Because greed always collapses under its own weight. Then, one morning as I sipped my coffee by the window, I saw a headline that made me freeze. Serena Morgan expands her private jewelry line, without Daniel. Her photo showed her alone, confident, glowing, with a caption that read, "A new queen rises from Miami's diamond empire." For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. Because I knew, the game he once played with me was now being played against him. And this time, I wouldn't stop it. It started slowly, like rust spreading under gold. One by one, Daniel's investments began to fail. Serena's new jewelry brand, Luna Luxe, became the talk of Miami's fashion circles, stealing the spotlight from Morgan Jewels. The press, once obsessed with Daniel's so-called brilliance, now praised Serena for her modern vision and independent empire. She gave interviews alone, always referring to Daniel as the man who taught me everything. Her tone carried the kind of politeness that hides a blade. I watched it unfold like a movie I'd already seen. Same script, same ending, just a different cast. Serena was young, beautiful, and ambitious, but above all, she was smart. Smarter than Daniel ever realized. While he was busy protecting his pride, she was quietly transferring assets into her own name. His properties, his shares, even the house they lived in. She made him believe it was for tax reasons and public image control. I could almost hear his voice convincing me years ago with those same excuses. Rumors spread that Daniel was drinking more. He was often seen alone at late-night bars, unshaven, distracted, eyes hollow. People whispered that Serena had taken over everything, but I knew she hadn't taken anything. He had given it all away, just like I once did. One evening, I received a message from an old acquaintance who still worked in the company. "You won't believe this," she wrote. "Serena fired Daniel from the board. She's launching a rebrand without him." I stared at the message for a long time, unsure of what I felt. There was no satisfaction, no laughter, just a deep, quiet recognition. The circle had completed itself. Weeks later, the inevitable headline appeared. Daniel Morgan faces bankruptcy, assets frozen amid legal battle. The man who once stole my fortune now had none left to steal. One rainy afternoon, as I left the shelter where I taught jewelry design, I saw him. Daniel. Standing across the street, drenched, thinner than I remembered, his clothes wrinkled and soaked. For a moment, I thought I was imagining him. But then he called my name. Eleanor. His voice cracked. I froze, keys in my hand. He looked so small against the gray Miami skyline. A man who had once owned everything and now owned nothing. His hair was grayer, his eyes red-rimmed. I walked toward him slowly, unsure if it was pity or closure that guided me. I tried to call you, he said. They took everything. His voice trembled. Serena, she used me. The way I used you. He gave a broken laugh. Karma's cruel, isn't it? Rain slid down his face like tears he didn't deserve to shed. I looked at him, the man who once stood tall beside me, and saw nothing but a reflection of the person I used to be, blinded by love, consumed by trust. You always said you'd never let me face the world alone, I said quietly. And yet here we are, both of us alone. He took a step closer, desperate. Ellie, please. I made mistakes, terrible ones. I lost everything that mattered. I need you. There was a time those words would have broken me. Now they only felt hollow. I shook my head. No, Daniel. You don't need me. You need forgiveness. But not from me. He looked confused, defeated. Then from who? I met his eyes, steady and calm. From yourself, if you can still recognize the man you used to be. He didn't answer. He just stood there, shoulders trembling, as the rain swallowed his voice. That night, as I sat by my window, the storm raged outside, heavy rain pounding the glass, thunder echoing in the distance. I thought about Daniel, alone in that storm, and realized that the same rain washing his sins away was the one cleansing mine. For years, I had carried the weight of betrayal, thinking it had broken me. But now I saw the truth, it had shaped me. The fire that once destroyed me had melted the metal of my pain and turned it into something unbreakable. He thought he had built an empire. But in the end, all he had built was his own downfall. It was late evening when I heard the knock on my door, slow, hesitant, the kind of sound that carried shame. I knew even before I opened it who stood on the other side. Years of love and betrayal have a way of tuning your instincts to a person's presence, even after time has buried it under layers of silence. When I pulled the door open, there he was, Daniel. The man who once called me his diamond, now nothing but a shadow of the man he used to be. His suit was wrinkled, his shoes soaked from the rain, his hair a mess of gray. He clutched a small suitcase in one hand, the last remnant of whatever pride he still carried. Eleanor, he whispered, his voice raw, almost childlike. I didn't know where else to go. For a long moment, I didn't speak. I simply looked at him. The man who once stood beside me at red carpet events, smiling for cameras, was now trembling on my doorstep. His eyes were red, his face pale, and his shoulders heavy with the weight of his own decisions. What do you want, Daniel? My voice was calm, controlled, so steady that even I was surprised by it. He exhaled, his breath shaky. I made mistakes. I was foolish. I let greed blind me. Serena. She took everything. I'm living in a motel, Ellie. I have nothing left. His voice cracked. You were right about everything. I folded my arms and leaned against the doorframe. Was I? Because I don't remember winning anything from this. He stepped closer, water dripping from his coat onto the floor. You won something far greater than money, he said, his tone pleading. You won peace. You won freedom. And he stopped, his words collapsing into silence. I just want forgiveness. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I had fallen in love with, young, hopeful, full of promises. But it was only an echo, buried under years of deception. Forgiveness, I repeated softly, letting the word roll off my tongue like a foreign language. You think forgiveness will fix this? You took everything I had, Daniel. You didn't just steal my company. You stole the years I can never get back. The years I spent believing you loved me. He lowered his head, his voice trembling. I know. And I'll spend whatever time I have left trying to make it right. I looked at him, really looked at him. The rain behind him blurred the world outside, and for a brief moment, it felt like the universe itself had paused, holding its breath. Then I spoke, slowly, deliberately. I already forgave you, Daniel. His head snapped up, hope flickering in his eyes. You did. Yes, I said. But not for you. For me. Because forgiveness isn't about setting you free, it's about setting myself free. His lips parted, but no words came. I stepped closer, my voice soft but unyielding. You wanted power. You got it. You wanted control. You had it. You wanted to win, and in doing so, you lost everything that ever mattered. So no, I won't hate you. I won't even pity you. But I also won't let you step back into the life you destroyed. Daniel swallowed hard, tears mixing with the rain on his face. I have nowhere else to go. I took a deep breath, my tone still gentle but final. Then you'll have to learn how it feels to start from nothing, the same way I did. He nodded slowly, defeated. His shoulders slumped as he turned to leave. For a moment, I considered calling him back, offering him warmth, a cup of coffee, maybe closure. But then I remembered the woman I was years ago, the one who handed him everything, believing love meant sacrifice. That woman was gone. As he walked down the path, his figure blurred through the curtain of rain until he vanished completely. I closed the door quietly behind him and leaned against it, exhaling a long, heavy breath. The house was silent except for the rain, and for the first time in years, that silence didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. I walked to the window and looked out into the storm. The sky flashed with lightning, illuminating the streets where Daniel had disappeared. Goodbye, I whispered, not to him but to the past. That night, I slept without dreams. And when I woke the next morning, the world outside felt brighter, lighter, as if the weight that had been pressing against my chest for years had finally lifted. Daniel had sought redemption in the wrong place. But I had already found mine, in letting go. A full year had passed since that night, the night Daniel came to my doorstep drenched in rain, carrying nothing but his regret. Since then, I had rebuilt more than just a life. I had rebuilt myself. The woman who once lost everything had now created something far greater. Not another empire, but a legacy. I launched a new jewelry line under my own name, Eleanor Morgan Designs, focused on handcrafted pieces made by women I trained at the shelter. Each diamond, each stone told a story of resilience. And for the first time in my life, success didn't feel like survival, it felt like peace. The world began to notice again. Magazines that once pitied me now celebrated me. Forbes called me the woman who rose from ashes with diamonds in her hands. Invitations poured in, interviews, conferences, but I chose carefully. I no longer chased recognition. I let it come quietly, like light through an open window. Then came the day of my first public exhibition. The event was held at the same Miami gallery where, years ago, Daniel and I had launched one of our biggest collections together. I remember standing there then, beside him, smiling for cameras, believing our love was forever. Now I stood there alone, not broken but whole. The hall was filled with journalists, designers, and women whose faces shone with admiration. My collection was displayed under soft golden lights, the centerpiece titled The Widow's Light, a necklace designed with interlocking diamond tears that glimmered like morning dew. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a symbol of what remains when everything else is taken away. As I stepped onto the stage, flashes from cameras painted the room in light. A reporter raised her hand and asked the question I knew would come. Ms. Morgan, may we ask why you named your new collection the Diamond Widow? I smiled, feeling the weight of every moment that had led me here. Every betrayal, every tear, every sleepless night that turned into strength. My voice was calm, sure, steady. Because a diamond only shines after pressure, I said. And I became one after betrayal. The audience fell silent. Then came the applause, slow at first, then louder, filling the hall with warmth. But to me, the real victory wasn't in their praise. It was in the stillness I felt inside, the kind that comes when pain has finally served its purpose. After the event, I stepped outside alone. The Miami air was warm, the ocean breeze soft against my face. I stood by the pier where Daniel had once proposed to me decades ago. I could almost hear his voice echoing from the past. I'll never let you face the world alone. I smiled faintly. You don't need to, I whispered. I'm doing just fine. The waves glistened under the fading sun, and for a moment, everything felt beautifully full circle. In that stillness, I realized something profound. Life doesn't punish or reward, it mirrors. It had shown Daniel his reflection in the woman who betrayed him. And it had shown me mine, in the strength I never knew I had. I looked down at the diamond pendant resting against my heart, its edges catching the last light of day. I had designed it myself, one flawless stone, small but fierce, shaped like a teardrop. It wasn't just a symbol of sorrow. It was proof that even from pain, something unbreakable could emerge. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, I whispered softly to myself, words no one else could hear. He may have taken everything from me once, but I took something back he'll never have again, peace. And with that, I turned away from the past, walking toward the lights of the city that once buried me. Each step felt lighter, stronger, brighter. Because I was no longer the woman who lost everything. I was the Diamond Widow. That was my story, a story of love, betrayal, and finding strength when everything seemed lost. If my journey touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, do you believe that people who betray others ever truly regret it? I'd love to know what you think.